Hello, and welcome to the Gateways, the Wisdom of 12-Step Spirituality. My name is Dr. Jane Galloway. I am the author of this book and the creator of a strength-based model for recovery using the 12 steps as a scaffold for developmental growth, but switching the shame-based approach to one that celebrates what is right about you. So the title of this broadcast is Let's Get Off the Bridge. In the wonderful literature and folklore of the 12 steps and the 12-step program, there's a great phrase, and it says, AA is a bridge back to life. It's used very often. It's a great metaphor, and for a while it's very true. However, in the over 3 decades, I've worked these steps and done many other holistic modalities to support recovery and moving into a much fuller life than I ever could have had if I hadn't encountered the 12 steps and recovery. I have observed that a lot of people seem to get stuck on the bridge. I've wondered about this for many years. I've studied developmental psychology and many interspiritual paths, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of holistic stuff, really just to support my own growth. And my investigation finally sent me back to the core program, which was actually designed to get people onto the bridge, but not necessarily off of it. Meaning, the program is a genius, amazing, channeled program to get people into stage 1 recovery. And the steps kind of take people right up to the door of step 11 and leave them there and say, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, that's step 12, but step 11 says, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand God, praying only for God's will for us and the power to carry that out. That is such a fantastic beginning for a spiritual life, for practicing a spiritual path. The issue is that there aren't a lot of particular or specific tools that are really given to help people understand how to walk this walk. So this program of the Gateways is designed to really help people get deeper into step 11 and move into this broad open vista of recovery that the 12 steps provide and lead us into. Really to lead us into a lifetime of evolutionary growth. You know, as a woman in recovery, I can say without a doubt that much of the language of the 12 steps is designed for men. Beyond this, really, so many people who become addicted do so because of childhood trauma, ADD, ADHD, anxiety disorders, etc., that they have found being a part of life to be really difficult. So I see addiction as a huge resiliency, an amazing tool. Most people I know who are addicted, who became addicted, really wanted to be part of life and had some of these overwhelmingly huge, kind of in some ways crippling issues that were keeping them from jumping into life. So using drugs, alcohol, and other process addictions can really be seen as a way to be in life. And the only problem with that is that it works for a while and then it stops working and the addiction becomes the problem. So hopefully the idea really is that whatever that self-prescribed medication is can be replaced with some kind of program of inner growth and abstinence. And that's what the 12 steps are great at. So we're looking at a long-term evolutionary opening into a really full life here and a resiliency-based, strength-based approach to living a life of recovery. So the Gateways is all about that. It's all about resiliency, tools for living an embodied spiritual life, and getting off the bridge. Really by developing the positive character traits and habits to support a meaningful and, prolonged addiction-free life. People I know who are on this recovery path, and I definitely know hundreds, I may even know thousands after all these years, are some of the most creative, amazing humans on the planet. I do see that there's something happening these days, which is that people are getting not only stuck on the bridge back to life, trying to find how to get into life and move beyond stage 1 recovery, but also people are relapsing, in part because this has become an accepted part of the culture, using the word relapse, which is a medical term, so it indicates that if you have an illness, you might be naturally inclined to relapse from that illness. That's one kind of thing that contributes to the idea of relapse. But another thing is that there really aren't steps beyond step 12 that are spelled out to help people really figure out, okay, how do I carry these principles, which are really countercultural principles, into a full life that really gives me the kind of support I need in order to stay clean, stay sober. And so many people have addictions that are just addictions of thinking. They're not even people who use drugs. So I use these terms about staying sober, but really it's a much bigger thing. So the idea of the gateways is really to begin to explore some of the amazing additional ways the steps can be understood as a support for the already unbelievably successful, fantastic, and life-renewing, life-giving 12-step program. I really want to say at this point, so that if anybody has any question about this, I love the 12-step programs. AA saved my life, and my dearest friends are people who are in recovery. I wouldn't really even be talking to you on this podcast, I can tell you for sure, if I had not discovered this path. So this is not something negative about that path. This is an addendum. This is saying, okay, what's next, right? So if we are really playing full out, we all hit bottom. If we're really playing full out, multiple times actually. And this is one of the concepts that a lot of people have difficulty with, this idea of hitting bottom. I am so grateful that I understand how important it was for me to hit a bottom. For me, it was emotional and physical as well, but it was critical for me to hit that bottom because my life got so much better, so much more quickly than I ever could have imagined, that if I hadn't had that reference point and that really understanding of how I did not want to go back there, I don't know if I would have stayed on this path, which is a path of inner, really inner reflection and kind of, it's not an easy walk particularly. It's being willing to look at oneself in a deep way. So a lot of the field of addiction recovery these days is talking about something called harm reduction. And I guess what I wanted to say about that is this. Harm reduction means, minimizing the amount of whatever the addictive substance is that you use, and having maybe somebody hold you accountable, et cetera, et cetera. That is a great idea, but it has been proven to basically not work. I'll tell you why. The reason it really doesn't work is that something kicks in with people who are addicted called the phenomenon of craving. So the person who decides to develop this program to monitor their own usage, their controlled drinking, their controlled gambling, whatever it would be, is not the same person as the one who actually is confronting the issue once they've picked up whatever they're addicted to, because something happens chemically in the systems of people who have this complex syndrome called addiction, so that really our thinking changes utterly and completely. So there are a lot of people who haven't gotten to a point of hitting bottom yet and maybe can monitor their behaviors. If people, however, have gone to the extreme of hitting bottom, they probably will never be a social drinker, social user again. So the idea is to really understand the power of that bottom. And I see it as a really powerful idea to expand beyond just the addictive model. You know, I love watching some of the mixed multiple arts people and a lot of athletes who really have learned how to fall but not get terribly injured. And I think this is a really good metaphor. Actors learn how to do this too. I was an actor for many years, a professional actor, and one of the classes we took, 2 classes that I will always remember and were important throughout my entire career and may even be good transferable things for life. One was entrances and exits. How do you enter and exit with authority into a scene, that would be, but into a room or into a conversation in life? That's a great transferable skill. And the other one was falling, how to fall on stage. So you've seen maybe sword fights or people get into fights as part of a play or part of a movie. And a lot of times there are stunt people if it's a really difficult scene. But actually, actors know how to fall. We learn how to fall. We learn techniques for bracing our fall. So the idea here really correlates with the idea of hitting a bottom, and learning how to fall is a positive skill. It's not really hitting the bottom that's the problem. It's the getting back up again that defines us. So the wisdom of 12-step spirituality provides for us a true bridge back to life. And the wisdom path is one that draws upon the lived experience, kind of the mystic experience, really, of many of the wise people of many, many different traditions over the millennia. Religions are culturally understood. So, you know, religions have a lot of differences among them. The formal religious practice of, say, Catholicism and Protestantism are probably a lot more different than the mystic path of anybody who's part of either one of those traditions. So really the idea is, as the wonderful yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda used to say, pick a path, any path, and go deeper. Because that is really the place where we discover that we are one. We're one when we get down to that place in this path. I think the principles of the 12 steps are transformational, truly transformational. And many people have missed the depth of some of these principles because they have tried to turn them into a kind of religion of their own. And this is, to me, really weird, because if you read the original literature, it really doesn't have that stuff in it. What happens with people, now I will add this, my doctorate is in religion, and I've studied many of the religions of the world. And as part of my studying, I actually looked pretty deeply into the origins of the AA program. And because the people who founded this program were really searching to find out what on earth could possibly help people to not only get sober but stay sober, they were searching every place. They knew that people were complex, and so they searched in psychology, they searched in religion, Carl Jung was the psychologist Carl Jung was a very important contributor to the understanding of this spiritual awakening, this transformational conversion kind of experience that he had observed was critical for people to actually be able to sustain a different kind of life and really get sober. There were doctors who were involved. Dr. Silkworth, who ran a program in New York City for recovering alcoholics or for not recovering alcoholics. He hospitalized many people and tried to help them get back to living. He was part of the conversation and also noticed that this spiritual process was necessary. And so there were many, many angles of this program that were looked at. And basically what the founders got back to was that, we don't know why or how, but this seems to be a low-level search for God that we're engaged in. This God-sized hole, some people call it, is filled up by developing really a spiritual life. But the way they describe it is very open. They say it's broad, roomy, and all-encompassing sort of openness of spirit. They don't describe it as you have to do this and you have to do that. That kind of rule-based system is really the stuff of humankind. And for some reason, over the millennia, people have drifted in that direction, wanting somebody to tell them what to do and what not to do, and have gotten into sort of a punitive tone if some of these things were not obeyed. So it's interesting, in the original literature, which is still the literature, some of the language is pretty anachronistic. It's all male language, which is, fine. That's how things were written then. I don't have a problem with that. I do have sort of an issue with this idea of looking at character defects as opposed to character traits. I see so many things that we develop as tremendous adaptive tools, but that's a little bit of a different issue. I want to just finish this idea of looking at the original material and this very open way of describing this spiritual walk that seems to be really key in keeping people addiction-free. It's having a spiritual awakening, and not just having the awakening, but, when you wake up, you have to figure out a way to stay awake. We're either moving toward the next step, the more enlightened next step, or we're moving backward. And so the idea here is to try to find some additional ways, other than some big, huge waking up experience, that help people get sober and stay sober. I'm kind of talking around in a funny way here. Part of the reason is that I don't want to just keep this so narrow that we're only talking about being sober, because I think there are people in Al-Anon, there are people in Overeaters Anonymous, and people in Gamblers Anonymous who work these steps extremely powerfully and maybe don't need to get sober from alcohol. So when I use that terminology, I hope you understand that I'm really just kind of talking about the original way the program was understood to work and the original purpose of the program, which was to get people sober. It's a pretty miraculous program, really. But so the idea here is to start looking at what the resiliencies are in people who find themselves wanting to be in recovery, as opposed to some of the language of the steps can be very punitive. And then the culture that grows up around it becomes doubly punitive, and people develop all these internal rules about how you have to do this and you have to do that. There's actually nothing in any of the 12-step literature that says you have to do anything. It says the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. That's it. And, boy, that would be surprising to a lot of these people who jump into these very rule-based, almost cultic offshoots of the original AA program, because they're told you have to join us for this breakfast and you have to do it this way and talk about what your original group is and your sponsor is a lineage of some kind of, who knows what it is, but it's really developing a whole religion, a rule-based religion based on their experience of the 12 steps. So that's what I'm interested in at all. What I want to help people do, and I hope we can really explore in these podcasts, is how people have discovered the resiliency at the core of who they are, which not only allowed them to really overcome some pretty big impediments to being part of life early on, and that may have involved using some sort of addictive process, and then had the miraculous moment of getting free through some sort of awakening, some sort of utilization of these steps. And then beyond that, I really want to talk about what the next stage of growth is. I think there's a developmental level beyond stage 1 recovery that doesn't have to throw out the 12 steps. There are some movements out there now who are calling themselves recovery movements, and I think they're fantastic. A lot of them are really using a lot of wonderful skills and tools, yoga, meditation, very wonderful things. But a lot of them have basically thrown out the 12 steps, partly because of this punitive undertone that people hear in some of the inner work. I encourage you to take a look at the book of the Gateways and to look at the language in there and see if these gateways might open you to a place inside of you where there's tremendous freedom to not beat yourself up, but to look at yourself. It's kind of a self-therapy program. It's fantastic. And say, wow, okay, when this happens, this is I'm kind of talking about the 4th step right now, but when this happens, I get a resentment against this person, and then it affects my feelings of self-esteem, and then what do? And that's the important part of all these steps, is that it provides that thing of what do I do, which is not productive. It used to lead to jumping into the addiction. But now, really, the answer is what do I do? And how can I change that to something that's more productive and more positive and something that leads me into a way of behaving differently and tapping upon these inner strengths which are in there. As I said earlier, people who become addicted are some of the most resilient, smartest, coolest people I've ever met. You know, to have a brain that works differently because of various different wiring situations in early life is not a negative. It's just different. And we haven't developed the tools to kind of describe what stage 2 recovery really fully looks like. So the gateways are one way we're going to get into having that conversation. Anyway, it's so great to begin the conversation over the weeks on this podcast. I'm going to be talking with various people in the recovery field and getting into the gateways path that I have unpacked through this book. I use a lot of different very interesting symbols and developmental paths, and I don't want to get into that too much right now. I want to leave that for our next section, and I'm going to really unpack some of these ideas for you. Just know that along with doing the basic 12-step work, I present many different modalities, including a musical note, the use of crystals, the use of a lot of cool stuff. So I'm going to keep that a little mysterious for right now and say thank you so much for joining us today. I hope this has opened up some ideas for you about a way to understand these 12 steps as a developmental model that leads us to the resiliency and inner strength in us rather than picks apart what's wrong with us. I think most of us have heard long enough what's wrong with us, right? So learning to say that behavior was compensatory and unproductive. But here's what I'm learning. The way I can use my real inner skills is this, is what this new way of looking at the 12 steps is all about. So, again, have a wonderful, happy week. And, again, my name is Jane Galloway, Reverend Dr. Jane Galloway. And I'm so happy and excited to be talking to you about some of these ideas of a strength-based recovery through the gateways, the wisdom of 12-step spirituality. Thanks so much. Peace and blessings.